It's Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
It's Throwback Thursday on ZiFM Sport, and this is the last of our World Cup power profiles. We've profiled England 1966, Italia 90, France 98, and last week, Africa's World Cup, South Africa 2010. Today, we bring you the World Cup that changed attitudes around women's football and pushed the drive for equality even further. The 8th edition of the Women's World Cup, which was France 2019. It's been described as the most important in history. Never before was there such a wealth of talent or as many title contenders, and perhaps never before has women's football had such a platform. The team in studio to deliver this today: Barry Menandi, Mike Madoda, Alois Bunjira, our producer, of course, Sean Tafirenyika, and my name is Chris Midzi. But before we get there, let's give you a local sports news roundup.
The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
Let's start with cricket news, where Zimbabwe national cricket team captain Sean Williams has challenged his team to perform at the highest level in their two-match test series against host Afghanistan early next month. The first test begins next Tuesday in the United Arab Emirates, and despite being a relatively inexperienced side, Williams has demanded that the Chevrons perform at their level best. In boxing news, trainer Clyde Musonda says that they're on the right track ahead of Saturday's African Boxing Union fight between Tinashe Mwadziwana and Namibia's Nathaniel Kakololo in Windhoek. Mwadziwana is challenging Kakololo for the ABU featherweight title. Musonda and Mwadziwana left for Namibia last week for the bout. Speaking from Namibia, Musonda said that the boxer has been settling in well and is making good progress. Let's wrap it up with rowing news, where Zimbabwe's Danielle Kashula produced a fine show yesterday at the World Rowing Indoor Championships to claim a bronze medal in the women's under-19 500-meter race. The championships are being held virtually. The 13-year-old, who set 5 world records during the lockdown last year, managed a podium finish yesterday. Egypt's Sarah Mohammed Zafir Saeed El Sayed was first, followed by Great Britain's Meg Knight.
Hi, my name is Rudoni Shamba, Maitoria's super striker. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
Penalty. It's Rapinoe against Van Veenendaal. It's 1-0. The USA 1, the Netherlands 0. Helped on by Mewis to Lavelle. The game's opening up. Rose Lavelle, lovely run, great goal! Brilliant goal! Rose Lavelle might have won the World Cup for the United States with a fantastic goal. The United States 2, the Netherlands 0.
It's the final edition of the Power Profiles. Today we talk about the Women's World Cup and the most iconic, which was France 2019. So the tournament was actually established in 1991, initially as the FIFA World Championship for Women's Football. It's developed since then, Barry, but if you take a look at it, this France 2019 was a turning point, and it almost changed the entire perception of women's football.
It certainly did. I think it's when this tournament took the right turn. In other words, it went from being just another tournament on the FIFA calendar to being actually mainstream, because I think it now has, and yes, I'm going to use the current term, which has the crossover appeal. And I think that's what FIFA always had in mind, and indeed the organizers, to make it not necessarily at par with the men's FIFA World Cup, but certainly headed in that direction. And I think it is now, because there are a lot of fans that came across from the men's game that watched the 2019 tournament and were pleasantly surprised with what they saw, that I think they will be back. So certainly 2019 will be that marker to say this is when the Women's World Cup went mainstream.
We definitely saw a new wave of those fans coming across from men's football over to watching the women's game as well. And FIFA President Gianni Infantino called the 2019 World Cup the Year of Women.
If I have to give it a title, I would say, the Year of Women. The Year of Women because of the Women's World Cup and everything that this Women's World Cup meant for women's football, but also more generally for all the discussions about equality and discrimination and the role of women in society and so on and so forth, but without overdoing it there, focusing on the Women's World Cup. Incredible experience, incredible figures, full stadiums. In France, 1.2 billion viewers worldwide. This is unprecedented, and by far this projects the Women's World Cup immediately after the Men's World Cup as, the biggest sporting event, one single sport, of course.
Mike, if you take a look at it, there almost seems to be an intentional push for the women's game and also an inclusion of women. And Fatma Samoura's appointment kind of points to the fact that FIFA definitely wants to extend and grow the women's game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They've had to do that. And for me, it's from two standpoints. The first one, obviously, is that the organization needed to be politically correct. And one of the ways you can do that is by incorporating women in your leadership positions. And there is no position more influential than the Secretary General. She's right up there with Gianni Infantino in terms of clout within the organization and in football associations around the world, notably in Africa, where what she says more often than not goes. And then secondly, from an economic point of view, where you cannot discount women. The sheer size of the women's population globally, their needs have got to be met. There are women who are playing a lot of football in the biggest, corporate market in the world. That's the United States of America. There are more women than men who are actually playing soccer, as they call it, or football, as we call it. And therefore, their voice has become increasingly louder and louder, with corporates demanding to partner the women's game as they have done in the United States of America. So FIFA, with one eye on the money and another eye on the politics and their image, decided to make some smart moves.
Some smart moves indeed, and the money is definitely key, especially if we're going to continue to see the growth. Alois, you've been a player, and during your time, I'm sure women playing football wasn't as common as it is now. If you take a look at the game from where it's grown from when you were a player, are these strides significant enough for you, or were you expecting more of an advancement in terms of women's football as a player?
I do think, Chris, that they have made very big steps towards the advancement of women's football. If you look at it, a few years ago, the Women's World Cup was not even as popular as it is now. Look at France 2019, 1.12 billion people viewing those matches. It was a record in its own, and you can actually see the growth that women's football is making. And even in South Africa, when I was still playing in South Africa, I could actually see how Banyana was growing with each and every year. You could actually tell even the popularity in the streets with the fans. We could actually tell that this is actually where the women's game is going. So I'm not surprised with what is happening now with FIFA. Like Mike said, they can actually see that there is a bankable money in the women's game. They can also look at the image as well, because there is a lot of talk, the politics about women's rights, about equality and everything. So all those things are coming into effect, and now they are bringing the women's game into its stride, and you can tell that fans are responding, corporates are responding, and before you know it, we are actually having academies. It used to be, America used to be very big on soccer, but other countries have caught up now, and you see academies. Women's football is growing as well. They are now starting at a very young age. So this is how the women's game is growing, even skill-wise, technically they are also growing as well. You could see in 2019, you could say the women's football was actually doing well. It was actually watchable, goals getting scored, technically brilliant players as well. So it's quite interesting. It's growing both technically and financially, even the fan base.
We saw how brilliant these players were at the World Cup in 2019, and even more impressive was the quality of football played even by the debutants. There were 4 debutants. That was Jamaica, the Reggae Girls, incredibly confident team, Chile, Scotland, and South Africa, Banyana Banyana. They finished bottom of their group, but if you take a look at the football that was being played, the number of goals being scored, even though the debutants stumbled and didn't make it past the group stages, they did mount a significant challenge, didn't they, Barry?
No, they did, and in truth, I can credit the popularity of the tournament, certainly in South Africa and possibly in Southern Africa, to the participation of Banyana Banyana. I think they did a phenomenal job to market the girls throughout their qualification journey, and then ultimately in going to the tournament itself. I think if there was a team that was profiled holistically and in depth, it was Banyana Banyana, and everyone was very hopeful when they played their first game, and obviously when they lost that narrowly, they then moved into their second. Yes, they didn't win any of their games, but as you quite rightly point out, the quality of football, the way that they approached the tournament, and even some of the players who were on the field got moves to Europe immediately after this tournament. So I think that's credit to Banyana Banyana and indeed all of the debutants themselves. I'll certainly say South Africa's marketing machine was alive and well for these girls.
And speaking of the African teams, we had 2 African teams that actually managed to reach the round of 16. That was Nigeria and Cameroon. Nigeria was then beaten 3-0 by Germany, and Cameroon also beaten 3-0, but that was by England. Mike, is there a bit of a disservice being done in terms of women's football on the continent? Because we're seeing that our teams are not necessarily progressing as the other continents do through the tournament.
Well, it's going to have to be organic growth, just like it was in the men's tournament. Remember, Africa only managed to get a quarter-final participant in the Men's World Cup in 1990, the second one coming 12 years later in 2002 when Senegal got to the quarterfinals. And then we had to wait another 8 years until Ghana became sort of like the third nation to make it to the quarterfinals in the Men's World Cup. I fear that the same pattern will probably emerge in the women's game. I think it's credit to Nigeria and Cameroon that they're able to get to the round of 16. The one area where African football is lacking in the women's game is the athleticism and the size of our girls. We've got a lot of our girls who are very high on technical ability, very skillful, but if you compare them in terms of size, strength, and athleticism to the women you get coming out of Germany, out of Norway, out of the United States of America, out of France, they then don't measure up. And in those games, it was not that Nigeria was not good enough to match Germany in terms of technical ability, but it's because they were overpowered and they were outrun over the course of 90 minutes. The same thing again to Cameroon versus England. They actually played the better football than England. They had some really skillful players, but they just didn't have the athleticism to match some of the pedigree nations in the women's game.
And when you talk about speed and athleticism, you can't miss the United States. They came into this as defending champions, and they won the tournament once again after beating the Netherlands. Alois, they even had a 13-0 win against Thailand, and this was a goal-scoring machine throughout the tournament.
Yeah, of course, Chris, United States, they've always been the superpowers of women football. Like Mike said, remember that they have more women playing football than men in the United States. I had the pleasure of staying a little bit in the United States as well, and I witnessed this firsthand. The development starts from primary school. They already have scholarships in primary school for women that are playing football, secondary school scholarships, university scholarships. So they know what they're doing. They respect women football that much. That's why they've got that level of skill. And like Mike said as well, their size is actually like they've got big girls that play football that are actually skillful. And you talked of goals. That's why the 2 players that finished as joint top goal scorers in that tournament with 6 goals each, and they also had the Golden Boot winner as well in that team. Alex Morgan had 6 goals, Rapinoe had 6 goals, and she ended up as the top goal scorer as well. So you can actually see that this is a team that is well trained, that is a well-oiled machine, and they've been playing football for a long time. Unlike in Africa, I wanted to join in where Mike talked about Africa and its lack of progress. I think one of the things that he didn't mention was development. We don't develop our girls early enough. We only start developing girls when we can actually see them playing football on their own in the street, but we don't do that from primary school. This is what United States do, and they are doing it very well.
They're doing it very well, and other countries across Europe are also doing the same thing. And I'm not just talking continental Europe. England as well became one of the emerging superpowers, didn't it, Barry? We also had the Netherlands and France, and this is in part due to some of these key players playing in some of the best women's leagues in Europe.
Absolutely, and also I think the fact that now you can see, certainly in the UEFA Confederation, there is now a replication of men's competitions across the women's setup as well. So you've got a Women's Champions League, you've got leagues that are running religiously in each of those countries. So you get the emergence of teams like Olympique Lyonnais, you've got your Arsenals, your Chelseas, your Manchester Uniteds, your Wolfsburgs are beginning to regularly send players to various national teams, and as a result of playing week in, week out, playing in domestic competition, going on to continental competition, what that does is it sharpens you as a team, yes, but also sharpens you as players. So players like your Delphine Cascarinos, albeit that they're young, they get a lot of game time. So when they go and then perform for France, they're already used to the pressure cooker of playing in front of big crowds and playing competitive football. That's what we need to replicate on the continent as well. Have regular competitions.
And one of the things, Chris, just to add on to what Barry has said, is that what Europe has really done well is put in place scouting systems that enable them to identify the best talent. So their teams at club level are no longer just made up of local stars. They are now made up of foreign stars. If you take a look at the likes of Kadidiatu Diani at PSG, and you get a lot of other players, at Barcelona, at Liverpool, you've got Nigerians that are coming in, your West Africans who are being picked up now and again by some of these top clubs. They're almost replicating the men's model and trying to perfect that model in their quest to catch up to the men's game. So it's credit to women that they're able to do this, and of course be able to stand up and put together a World Cup that is the equal of any of the men's tournaments.
So kudos to the women across the tournament who were able to bring us that much star power, that much quality. But it would be a total disservice if we didn't talk about Megan Rapinoe. I mean, she has been called a number of names, including the internet's new girlfriend by Elle Magazine. And she was an absolute superstar in this tournament, Barry.
She was indeed, and credit to her because of her performances first and foremost, but then also her activism outside of the tournament. We all recall her telling off President Donald Trump publicly, and then also her goal celebration, which was basically an adaptation of Lady Liberty, which was promoting the immigrant population in America and talking about inclusive nature of America. So I think she did well on the pitch as well as off the pitch, and as a result was probably the biggest star at this World Cup.
Probably the biggest star at this World Cup. She did manage to get, like Aloy said, the golden boot and the golden ball. Let's hear from World Cup star herself, Megan Rapinoe.
We've all found our voice more and more, and the confidence in that, not only as a group, but sort of as individuals as well. And so it just seemed like every moment there was, negative or positive or tweets or this and that. And the group just kind of takes it on the chin and keeps going. I think that we also are so confident in our true north. Like, we know that we are doing the right thing. We know we set the right example. We go about things the right way. We're respectful. We respect the game. And we play our absolute hearts out for each other, for this country. And on the biggest stage, I think that this team just relishes that moment and just, performs every time.
Other award winners at the tournament included silver ball winner Lucy Bronze from England, bronze ball winner Rose Lavelle, revelation at this tournament from the US, silver boot winner Alex Morgan from the US as well, bronze boot went to Ellen White from England, golden glove went to Sari van Veendel from the Netherlands, and the FIFA Young Player Award went to Julia Guevin from Germany. 146 goals scored in 52 matches. That's an average of 2.81 goals per match. Now, good viewing makes for a lot of money, but how much does the tournament actually make? Well, the figure of $131 million has been thrown around, but it's not entirely accurate. Alois, you take a look at those numbers in terms of viewership, in terms of TV ad revenue. There's a real opportunity here for this tournament to grow and make a lot more money. And also, this might be the incentive for why there's talk of having a FIFA Women's World Cup every 2 years.
Yeah, I think FIFA has seen that there is money that can be made from the Women's World Cup. 1.12 billion viewers. It's quite a lot of money. And we are talking about also spectators coming in numbers to actually watch these matches as well. That's why they are thinking of increasing the number from 24 to 32 so that they can actually make more moolah. How? Because more countries participating, it means their nationals are also watching the tournaments as well. It's actually a marketing strategy throughout the world so that they can bring in more people to be watching the World Cup as well, while we are having more participants as well. So FIFA has actually seen that, that we can actually grow the women's football so that we can actually make more, they can actually make more money from the football. So I can only see the women's football growing more and more as we go through the years.
And it wouldn't be a World Cup without any kind of controversy. There was a bit of chit-chat, Barry, around the celebrations of the US team and the number of goals they scored against Thailand. It's been called classless behavior. Was there anything particularly wrong with the number of goals scored and those celebrations?
Not at all. Not at all. I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. They are at a World Cup. They're scoring goals. You celebrate the goals. They're there to win. It's not necessarily to make friends. Yeah. Some people might say that it lacked class. But for me, I think if you're scoring a goal, celebrate it and get as many as you can.
No, I totally disagree, Chris. It's classless behavior. You've got to consider the nations that you're up against. I could have understand if they were pummeling Germany, a nation that's at their equal, and you would have to rejoice. But you know what? They're celebrating, and then there's rubbing your opponent's face in the muck. And I think the Americans were guilty of rubbing the Thailand side's face in the muck. Here's a side that was participating at the World Cup. Just that for them was the success, and so some of the celebrations went over the top because it almost like they were laughing at the Thailand players. You see, you can celebrate, you're allowed to celebrate, but when your celebrations cross the line and you look like you're mocking the inadequacies of your opponent, then that's classless. You can celebrate, but don't go on the side where you are mocking and belittling your opponent.
We expect a glut of goals in the next World Cup that's going to be in 2023, and it's going to be in Australia and New Zealand.
Hi, this is Alexandra Maseko, and I'm the national basketball team captain, and you're listening to ZiFM Sport.
Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
Let's take you around the world in 60 with me. As a difference today, we start in Japan, where the Vice President, International Olympic Committee, John Coates, has said athletes are encouraged to take the COVID-19 vaccine ahead of the Tokyo Olympics, but it will not be compulsory. This follows comments made last month by IOC President Thomas Bach, who said individual national Olympic committees would coordinate vaccine rollouts, but that he was not in favor of athletes jumping the queue. Over to the United States, where Phoenix Suns guard Devin Booker has been selected to replace injured LA Lakers forward Anthony Davis in the NBA All-Star Game. The commissioner of the NBA, Adam Silver, chose Booker to take Davis's place a day after Booker was snubbed by the league's head coaches for a reserve spot in next Sunday's game in Atlanta. Booker received a big ovation from the home crowd last night when the sixth-year guard was announced as a two-time All-Star during the starting lineup introductions. Let's land in a roundup of European football, where Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola says his side have to be more clinical despite seeing another dominant display sweep aside Borussia Mönchengladbach 2-0 for a 19th successive win. Guardiola's team, favourites to win their first Champions League title this season, were far too good for their meek last 16 opposition in Budapest. In Italy, Ferland Mendy scored a stunning late winner as Real Madrid clinched a hard-fought 1-0 victory against 10-man Atalanta. That's all we've got for you around the world in 60. Our play of the day. We'll wrap it up.
Hi, my name is Rune Shamba, Mytoria's super striker. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
The FIFA Women's World Cup France 2019 official song, it's Tiesto and Dzeko, not Eden Dzeko, Dzeko the DJ. It's featuring Lena Leon. It's called Halfway There. We're back tomorrow for our preview show. Don't miss it, 5 after 6 here on ZiFM Stereo. For now, may God richly bless you. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Manande, out.